Heads up, everyone. Before we begin, I want to be upfront. This story explores some very mature themes. We'll be navigating the intense challenges of early motherhood, the complexities of family relationships, and the deep wounds of infidelity. If these topics might make you uncomfortable, this might be a good time to pause or choose another story from Hidden Love Stories. Your well-being matters to us. Still with me? All right. My name is Sarah Miller, and I'm 42 years old. If you took a snapshot of my life right now, you'd probably label it unconventional. That's putting it mildly. But I've learned to embrace the tangled reality of it. Honestly, if you had even whispered to me 10 years ago that my life would twist and turn like this, I would have laughed in your face, dismissing it as some kind of bizarre joke. I'd never have believed you for a second. Yet, here I sit. It's a quiet morning, the kind where the silence almost hums, and I'm just staring into a half-empty coffee cup on my kitchen table. My thoughts are like a slow-motion replay, drifting, trying to piece together the puzzle of the last decade, desperately searching for some kind of meaning in the wreckage and the rebuilding. It's like trying to catch smoke. Have you ever felt that way? Like you're sifting through your own life, looking for the why? Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a moment that just completely upended everything you thought you knew. And hey, if you're intrigued by stories that aren't afraid to explore the messy, real parts of life, make sure you hit that subscribe button for Hidden Love Stories and ring the bell. We've got so many more journeys to share, and we hope you'll find something that resonates with you here. For the past 8 years, it's been just me and my son, Ethan. Ever since the divorce, we've been this tight-knit duo, navigating life like it was us against the world. I remember when it all started to unravel, the day his father walked out. Ethan was only 10. He didn't shed a single tear in front of me. He rarely does. But I saw the change in the subtle way he carried himself, that new, almost invisible weight on his small shoulders. I'd see it in the quiet, longing way he'd gaze out the window, as if he was still waiting, hoping his dad would just reappear. Even though, deep down, I think he knew it wasn't going to happen. Every single day he'd wait, and every day I had to watch that flicker of hope dim in his eyes, replaced by a disappointment that settled slowly, painfully on his young face. The day his father left, I made a silent, ironclad promise to myself. I swore, right then and there, that I would do whatever it took, anything, to make sure Ethan never felt alone. I would be his rock, his one constant. I would wrap him in the warmth and security of a family, even if that family was just the two of us. That promise became the bedrock of my entire existence, the invisible force that's kept me going, even on the days so dark I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. It hasn't always been easy, not by a long shot, but I've poured everything I have into creating a sense of stability for him, giving him all the love and support he needs, no matter what life decided to throw our way. For a long time, I genuinely believed I was holding it all together. Ethan was such a sweet kid, so kind, so quiet, always looking for little ways to help me around the house. There was a gentleness about him, something that made him stand out, even among other children. But as he got older, things started to shift, subtly at first, then more noticeably. He began to change in ways I couldn't quite grasp. And if I'm being brutally honest with myself, I could see myself changing too. Ethan turned 18 this year. In many ways, it felt like a massive milestone for both of us. He's not a child anymore. And yet, sometimes, I catch myself thinking he's still teetering on that confusing edge, figuring out what it truly means to be a man. That transition isn't always a smooth, clear path, and I can see he's struggling with it. He's always been a bit reserved, Even as a little boy, he never had that burning need to be constantly surrounded by other kids, never sought out the loud, chaotic interactions that most of his peers thrived on. He doesn't go out much now, preferring the quiet sanctuary of our home. He doesn't really have close friends, not in the way you might expect a young man his age to. I've tried talking to him about it, gently probing, trying to understand if there was something wrong, if he was feeling lonely or lost. But every time I bring it up, he just shrugs it off, dismissing my concerns with a casual, "I'm fine, Mom." But I know him better than he thinks. I know he's not fine. A mother just knows these things, even when her child tries to build a wall of denial. About a month ago, Ethan came to me with something I could never have anticipated, something I was utterly unprepared to hear. It was late, the kind of evening where the house settles into a hushed quiet, just the two of us in the living room. He suddenly opened up, his vulnerability raw and exposed in a way I hadn't seen since he was very small. He told me he'd been using my things, my underwear. At first, I was just confused, utterly bewildered. My mind couldn't make sense of the words. And then, when it hit me, when the full, crushing weight of what he was trying to say finally registered, it felt as though the earth beneath me had just vanished. My heart hammered against my ribs, my breath caught in my chest. A tidal wave of emotions, shock, disbelief, a surge of anger threatened to pull me under. I wanted to shout, to demand, to know what on earth could have been going through his mind. What could possibly make him think that was okay? But I didn't. Instead, I just stood there, frozen, watching him. He looked so small in that moment, so deeply ashamed, so profoundly embarrassed. His eyes were cast downward, desperately avoiding mine. His posture was hunched, a physical manifestation of his inner turmoil that made my heart ache for him. The boy who had once been so eager to help, so full of quiet kindness, was now sitting there, burdened by something I couldn't begin to comprehend. And in that instant, through the fog of my own shock, I realized something profound. This wasn't just about what he had done. It wasn't about the act itself, the initial shock, or the anger that flickered within me. It was about something much deeper, something he had never been able to articulate, a maelstrom of feelings he couldn't bring himself to say out loud. This was about his struggle, his profound confusion, his gnawing loneliness, and his underlying fear. Somehow, all I could do was sit there with him, trying to understand not just the stark facts of what happened, but the silent, painful emotions he was carrying, emotions he hadn't yet learned how to express. He wasn't some kind of monster, some deviant. He was my son, and he was struggling desperately with feelings he didn't understand, with urges he couldn't control. I couldn't bring myself to make him feel worse than he already clearly did. So, in that moment of crisis, I made a choice, a deal. I told him he could continue, but there would be rules. He could find his release, but he had to do it in front of me. That way, I rationalized, I could make sure he was safe, that he wasn't crossing any more lines, that this didn't escalate into something even more hidden and potentially dangerous. In exchange, I told him I'd bring whoever I wanted into the house, and he wouldn't question or judge me. It wasn't a perfect solution, far from it. What do you think? Was there a better way to handle such an impossible situation? Sometimes, in the dead of night, I still wonder. If you've ever faced a dilemma with no clear right answer, I'd be interested to hear how you navigated it in the comments below. And if you appreciate stories that delve into the complexities of human choices, consider giving this video a like to let us know. We hope our channel, Hidden Love Stories, can be a space for these kinds of thoughtful discussions. Since then, things have been different. Ethan seems more relaxed, less on edge. He still doesn't talk much, but he doesn't avoid me like he used to. And me? Well, I've started to realize that this arrangement, as unsettling as it is, isn't just for him, it's for me too. It gives me a strange, uncomfortable kind of freedom I've been craving for years. The freedom to live my life without feeling like I have to tiptoe around his unspoken needs. Sometimes, late at night, I lie awake and wonder if I made the right choice. I wonder what people would think if they knew the truth of our arrangement. Would they call me a bad mother, a failure? Maybe they would. But they don't know Ethan. They don't know what it's like to see your child hurting so profoundly and feel utterly powerless to fix it. They don't know the crushing weight of feeling like you're barely holding everything together, just desperately trying to keep from completely falling apart. I don't know what the future holds for us. I don't know if this arrangement will work long term, or if it's just a ticking time bomb waiting to explode and shatter what's left of our fragile peace. But for now, this is our life. This is the path we've chosen, or perhaps stumbled onto. And as messy and complicated and utterly unconventional as it is, I'm doing the best I can for him and for both of us. The deal wasn't something I planned. It wasn't something I thought through with any clarity. It just happened. One moment I was sitting there, reeling, trying to figure out how to even talk to Ethan about what he'd confessed. And the next, the words were spilling out of my mouth as if they had a mind of their own. "You can keep doing it," I said, the words hanging heavy in the air. "But I need some things in return." He looked at me like I'd just started speaking in another language. His face went pale. His hands clenched into tight fists on the kitchen table. For a heart-stopping second, I thought he was going to bolt, to just get up and walk out. Maybe a part of me wanted him to. Maybe I was hoping he'd say no, tell me I was crazy, and storm out of the room, but he didn't. He just sat there, staring, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, as if he couldn't form the words. What do you mean?" he finally asked, his voice shaky, quiet, like he wasn't sure if he really wanted to hear the answer. I took a deep breath, the air feeling thick and insufficient. "I mean, you can keep doing it, but only in front of me. And in return, I get to live my life the way I want. I get to bring people into this house without you saying a word about it. No judgment, no questions. We both get what we need, okay?" A long, suffocating silence stretched after that. Ethan didn't say a word. He just stared, his brow furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line. I could practically see the gears turning in his head as he tried to process what I'd just proposed, trying to make sense of it all. I was doing the same thing, if I'm honest. The words were out there now, hanging between us, and I couldn't take them back. Not that I was even sure I wanted to. Finally, he nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. "Okay," he said, his voice so soft I almost didn't hear it. "If that's what you want." And that was it. That was the deal. The first time it happened, I thought I was going to throw up. I sat on the edge of my bed, my heart pounding like a drum solo in my chest, my palms slick with sweat. I kept telling myself this was what he needed, that it was better than the alternative, that I was doing this for him. But deep down, a cold knot of certainty told me it wasn't that simple, it never is. Ethan walked into the room, his eyes glued to the floor. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. We didn't look at each other. We just sat there, two people in a room, pretending like it wasn't happening, like this was just another mundane, normal day. And when it was over, he left. Without a word. I didn't move for a long time after that. I just sat there, staring at the wall, trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that this was fine. It's strange, the things you can get used to. At first, every time felt like a punch to the gut, but over time it got easier. Or maybe I just got better at pretending it didn't bother me, building up calluses around my heart. I told myself it wasn't hurting anyone, that it was just different, unconventional. I told myself I was being practical, that I was making the best out of a deeply flawed situation. And for a while, I almost believed it. Ethan, on the other hand, was a different story. He tried to act like everything was fine, but I could see it in his eyes. The shame, the guilt, the self-loathing. He never said it out loud, but I knew he hated himself for needing this, for needing me in this way. And every time I saw that haunted look on his face, it broke my heart a little more. But what was I supposed to do? He was my son, my only child. I couldn't turn my back on him. I couldn't let him drown in his own turbulent feelings while I just stood by and watched. So I did what I always do. I put on a brave face and pushed forward. For him, for us. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. Most days, I'm not even sure what the right thing is anymore. But this is where we are, the life we've built, however strange. And for now, it's enough. It has to be. At first, it wasn't so different in terms of frequency. Ethan stuck to a routine, if you could even call it that. Once in the morning, sometimes again in the evening. It wasn't predictable, but it felt manageable. I told myself this was just a phase, that he'd get tired of it, that it would taper off once the novelty wore off. But I was profoundly wrong. Instead of slowing down, it only picked up. Slowly at first, a morning session turned into an afternoon one, and then sometimes into a night. Then it was 2 mornings back to back. I started noticing, with a growing sense of unease, how quickly the hours in the day began to revolve around this arrangement. There were fewer stretches of normality, fewer moments when the air in the house didn't feel heavy with the unspoken tension of what we'd agreed to. I tried to ignore it, to push it to the back of my mind, but it was always there, lingering like a persistent shadow. The first time I felt a deep, gut-wrenching unease about it, I was in the middle of folding laundry. Ethan walked in without saying a word, his expression tense, his body language stiff. I knew what he wanted before he even opened his mouth. I put the clothes down and sat on the edge of the couch, waiting. But something was different this time. He didn't just leave when it was over. He lingered, looking at me, really looking at me, like he was trying to say something but couldn't find the words. I felt my stomach clench, the weight of the moment pressing down on me like a physical stone. "You okay?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. He nodded, but I could see it in his eyes. This wasn't just about relief anymore. It was becoming something more. That night, sleep was impossible. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the day over and over in my mind. I told myself not to overthink it, that I was imagining things. But deep down, a cold dread was spreading. This wasn't just a way for him to cope anymore. It was something he was starting to need, something he was beginning to rely on. The scariest part? I wasn't sure how to stop it. In the days that followed, Ethan's behavior shifted even more. He stopped trying to hide his need, stopped waiting for what might be considered right moments. It was like he didn't care about boundaries anymore, like the deal we'd made was a free pass to do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. And maybe it was. I had given him the freedom to do this, hadn't I? The first time I teased him, it felt almost accidental. I was in the kitchen making dinner when he walked in. I could feel him watching me as I moved around, his eyes following my every step. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I wanted to break the suffocating tension. Or maybe a darker part of me was testing him, seeing how far he'd go. But without really thinking, I slipped my light jacket off my shoulders, letting it fall onto the counter. His breath hitched audibly, and I turned to face him, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "Something wrong?" I asked, pretending not to notice the way his cheeks flushed. He didn't answer. He just turned and left the room. But I could feel the weight of his gaze lingering even after he was gone. After that, it became a kind of silent, dangerous game. I'd pull my hair up slowly, letting my shirt ride up just a little too high. Leave my jeans unbuttoned a little too long while I was doing chores. Nothing explicit, nothing overt. Just enough to make him squirm, to make him hesitate before turning away. It gave me a strange, disquieting sense of control, a power I hadn't felt in years, and I hated how much a twisted part of me liked it. But with every passing day, the line between us blurred a little more. He started seeking me out more often, finding excuses to be near me, even when he didn't ostensibly need to be, and I let him. I told myself it was harmless, that it didn't mean anything. But the truth was, I wasn't sure what it meant anymore. I wasn't sure of anything. There was a moment late one evening when it all seemed to come to a head. Ethan was sitting across from me in the living room, his eyes fixed on me as I pretended to read a book. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the kind that made your skin prickle and your heart race. I looked up at him, meeting his intense gaze, and for the first time, I didn't look away. Neither did he. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating, until I finally cleared my throat and stood up. "I'm going to bed," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't respond, but I could feel his eyes on me as I walked away. I don't know how we got there. I don't know how I let it get this far, but here we are, caught in a destructive cycle I'm not sure how to break. And as much as I want to believe I'm still in control, I can't shake the terrifying feeling that I've already lost. It wasn't until Rick Johnson entered our lives that everything began to truly unravel. I met him through a friend, one of those casual introductions you never think much about at first. But Rick wasn't the kind of man you could easily forget. He was charming in an effortless way, like he didn't even have to try to make you smile. He had this laugh that filled a room, warm and disarming, and he made me feel lighter. Like maybe, for the first time in years, I could actually let my guard down. Rick started coming over more often. At first, it was just for dinner or a drink on the back porch. But soon he was staying later, lingering in the living room after Ethan had retreated to his room. And then one night, he didn't leave at all. I didn't try to hide it from Ethan. That wasn't part of our deal after all. Still, I couldn't ignore the look on his face the next morning when he saw Rick sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee like he'd been there for years. It was subtle, but I knew my son well enough to recognize the tight set of his jaw, the way his hand tightened around his cereal bowl just a little too hard. At first, Ethan didn't say anything. He just watched from the periphery, quiet and sullen. But as the weeks went by and Rick's presence in our house became more frequent, his silence morphed into something sharper, more abrasive. He started snapping at me over little things, forgotten errands, mismatched socks, trivial annoyances that seemed to take on a life of their own. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just his way of adjusting. But the truth was, I could feel the resentment growing between us, thick and heavy, like a storm waiting to break. One evening, as Rick and I sat on the couch, laughing over something silly, Ethan walked into the room. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite place. When I looked up and met his eyes, I saw it. The hurt, the anger, the raw confusion that had been bubbling beneath the surface for weeks. Before I could say anything, he spoke, his voice low and trembling. "Do you even care anymore?" he said, his words cutting through the air like a knife. Rick looked at me, startled, but I didn't take my eyes off Ethan. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. He took a step closer, his fists clenched at his sides. "You don't care about me, about us, about what we're doing, has done to me." The room went silent. Even Rick didn't dare to move. I stood up slowly, my chest tight as I searched Ethan's face for some kind of explanation. "Ethan, that's not true," I said softly. "Of course I care about you." "For me?" he shot back, his voice rising, cracking. "How is any of this for me? You let this guy just waltz into our lives like it's nothing. You sit there and laugh with him like I don't even exist." I felt the air leave my lungs, his words hitting me harder than I expected. "Ethan," I said, reaching out to him, but he pulled away before I could touch him. "I didn't know you felt this way," I whispered. "Of course you didn't," he said bitterly. "You're too busy with your freedom, or whatever it is you think this is. Do you even see me anymore, or am I just convenient?" The silence that followed was deafening. Rick shifted uncomfortably on the couch, muttering something about giving us space before slipping out the front door. I barely noticed. All I could see was my son, standing there, trembling with emotions I'd ignored for far too long. That night, after Ethan stormed off to his room, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the empty coffee cup Rick had left behind. Ethan's words kept replaying in my head, over and over, each one cutting a little deeper than the last. He was right. I hadn't been thinking about him. Not really. I'd been so focused on trying to make this impossible situation work, on convincing myself that everything was fine, that I hadn't stopped to truly consider what it was doing to him. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt the full crushing weight of my choices. The deal I'd made with Ethan, the boundaries we'd obliterated, the lines we'd blurred into non-existence. It wasn't just about us anymore. It was about what we were becoming and the devastating damage we were leaving in our wake. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there staring at the door, wondering if there was still a way to fix this or if it was already far too late. What do you do when you realize you've made a terrible mistake, one that's hurt the person you love most? It's a hard question, and if you've ever been there, you know the feeling. We're all human. We all stumble. If you're finding value in this story of confronting hard truths, maybe take a moment to hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Love Stories for more explorations of the human heart. We believe sharing these stories helps us all feel a little less alone. The day after our argument, the house was unnervingly quiet. Ethan stayed in his room, the door closed, the air thick with unspoken tension. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee, the steam curling up like a fog, clouding my thoughts. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to do something. Whatever this was, whatever we had twisted our relationship into, it couldn't go on. Not for him, not for me. Later that afternoon, I knocked on his door. No answer at first. I waited, pressing my forehead against the cool wood of the frame. "Ethan, please," I said softly. "I need to talk to you." Finally, the door creaked open, and he stood there, his face guarded, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "For everything. For not seeing how much this has hurt you. For letting things get this far." I was wrong. His expression didn't soften immediately, but he stepped aside to let me in. I sat on the edge of his bed while he leaned against the wall, arms crossed over his chest. "We need help," I admitted, the words tasting like ash. "Both of us. I can't keep pretending I know what I'm doing, and I can't let us keep going down this path. I've already made too many mistakes, but I want to try to fix them, if you'll let me." Ethan didn't say much at first. He just nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. A few days later, we were sitting in a small, quiet office across from Dr. Peterson, a family therapist I'd found online. Dr. Peterson was a kind woman, her demeanor calm and steady in a way that made you feel safe, even when you didn't want to talk. At first, neither of us did. We sat in silence, the weight of our story too immense, too shameful to put into words. But Dr. Peterson had a way of gently breaking through that silence, asking questions that didn't feel like prying, but like soft invitations. Slowly, haltingly, Ethan began to open up. He talked about the crushing loneliness he'd felt since the divorce, the deep confusion he carried about our arrangement, and the bitter resentment that had been building inside him for so long. I listened, tears streaming down my face as I heard him finally put words to feelings I'd dismissed or ignored for far too long. In the weeks and months that followed, therapy became a part of our fractured routine. It wasn't easy. There were days when we left her office more drained and emotionally raw than when we arrived. Days when I questioned if we were really making any progress at all. But bit by bit, the walls between us began to crumble. Dr. Peterson helped us establish boundaries, real boundaries this time. I told Ethan that our deal was over, that it had been a terrible mistake born of desperation and fear, and that we needed to start fresh, however painful that might be. At first, he struggled to adjust. There were moments when I caught him retreating into old habits, his frustration boiling over into anger or tears. But with Dr. Peterson's guidance, we found healthier ways to cope. Ethan started journaling, something I never thought he'd try, and even joined a local martial arts class where he found a physical outlet for his pent-up emotions. Slowly, I saw him change. He stood a little taller, spoke a little more confidently, and began spending more time out of the house, building connections that weren't tethered to me and our shared dysfunction. For me, the hardest part was facing myself, really, truly facing myself. Therapy forced me to confront the choices I'd made, the myriad ways I'd let my own fears, insecurities, and unresolved pain dictate my relationship with Ethan. I'd spent so much time trying to hold on to him, to fill the gaping void left by the divorce, that I hadn't seen how it was suffocating both of us. Letting go of that desperate control, learning to trust that he could stand on his own, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. One evening, months after our first therapy session, Ethan and I were sitting on the back porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. He looked over at me, a small, genuine smile on his face. "Thanks, Mom," he said. "For everything." It wasn't much, but in that moment, it was enough. I reached over and squeezed his hand, a simple gesture that spoke volumes without needing words. We're still figuring things out. Healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, complicated, and full of setbacks and detours. But for the first time in what feels like an eternity, I feel hopeful. Ethan is finding his way. And so am I. And while we may never fully erase the mistakes we've made, we're learning how to move forward together, one cautious step at a time. Life doesn't come with an instruction manual, does it? And even if it did, I probably would have lost mine or thrown it out a long time ago. Ethan and I have been through more than I ever imagined any two people could handle, but somehow we're still here. Still trying, still learning. The house feels different now, lighter somehow. Maybe there's a kind of peace that comes from finally, truly working towards something better, something healthier. Ethan has found his footing. He spends more time out with friends he's made, more time focusing on his own interests, on building a life for himself. And when we do cross paths in the quiet of our home, it feels like we're meeting as individuals, not as two people hopelessly tangled in a messy, destructive arrangement we didn't fully understand. We still have our moments, of course. Healing isn't about achieving perfection. It's about progress, however slow. For me, it's been a profound journey of facing myself, of stripping away the denial and the justifications. I've had to learn to forgive my own mistakes, to let go of the suffocating guilt that weighed me down for so long. I've had to accept that I can't always fix things, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone you love is to step back and let them find their own strength, their own way. It hasn't been easy, but I'm incredibly proud of the progress we've made, not just as a mother and son, but as two human beings learning how to respect and trust each other again. If there's one thing I've taken away from all of this, it's the absolute, non-negotiable importance of boundaries, real ones. Healthy ones. They're not just rules, they're profound acts of love. Love for the people around you, and just as importantly, love for yourself. They're how you protect what truly matters while still allowing room for growth, for understanding, for genuine connection. I've learned that accountability is just as vital as forgiveness. That sometimes the hardest thing you can possibly do is admit you've been devastatingly wrong. But it's also the most freeing. To anyone out there listening, to anyone who might be struggling in the shadows, I want to say this: mistakes don't define you. They are a part of the human experience. What truly defines you is what you do after the fall, how you pick yourself up, how you face the people you've hurt, and how you choose to move forward. Growth isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to change, even when it scares you to death, even when it hurts more than you thought possible. Ethan and I are still figuring things out, and I suspect we always will be. That's just life, isn't it? A continuous journey of learning and adapting. But for the first time in a very long time, I feel like we're on solid ground. We're building something better, something healthier, brick by painful, hopeful brick. And I know with a certainty that settles deep in my bones that we'll keep moving forward together. So I want to hear from you. What would you do if your world fell apart like mine did? How would you even begin to move forward from something that felt so broken? Share your thoughts and insights in the comments below. Your perspective is so valuable. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something, please don't forget to give it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to Hidden Love Stories for more real, unfiltered stories. We're so grateful to have you here. Trust me, there's always so much more to uncover in the human experience, and we're here to explore it together. May you find strength and understanding in your own journey.